The following presentation is a gift from the team at Streamline Publishing, publishers of Fine Art Connoisseur, Plein Air Magazine, and weekly newsletters Fine Art Today, Realism Today, Plein Air Today, and American Watercolor, and events the Plein Air Convention and the Figurative Art Convention. We offer over 400 different art instruction tutorials and ultra high-quality video by the world's leading artists. If you like what you see, help us support our artists and our team with your purchase. Each video aired has a special discount code for today only in the comments section with a link to the video offered. And to see everything we do, or if you want to receive notice of new releases, new products, and new events for artists, simply click the other link, which says, "See everything we do." Thank you.
Hi, I'm Eric Rhodes with Fine Art Connoisseur and Plein Air Magazines, and we hope you're enjoying our videos. Today we've got a great one for you, Painting the Effects of Light with the great JKathryn Stats.
Hi, my name is JKathryn Stats, and thank you for joining me. I think it'll be fun to see different approaches on how one can put together a solid piece of painting. I've chosen a subject matter with many different motifs: water, rocks, trees, distance, and I think it'll be fun to explore those things with me. So let's go ahead and start with composition. I have my iPad here to show you my thought process when starting this painting. First of all, when I find a motif, it's all about the patterns. If the dark patterns, and that includes cast shadow, are pleasing, then you've pretty much got something you can work with. So on this is the original photograph. It's up at the old entrance to Glacier, taken from a bridge. I fell in love with the water and the reflections, and it was just a fine piece of work. So basically this was working for me. The question would be, how much of this foreground to show? I chose not to show it. This is going to be a bit of a problem here, but you need to have a plan before you start and hope to not vary from that. That doesn't mean it turns out being a bad plan, but this is a good one. I've worked it through. So let's go to the black and white. And the reason I shoot this is to keep from kidding myself with values. I've been known to say, and it was on a previous film, that I had no problem with values. I pretty much had that down, thank you very much, and that I preferred color. Well, it's out there in front of God and everybody, and my apologies, I take it back. Value is everything, and so you can see where I'm getting my idea on what values they actually are, because you can get faked out if you see reflected light in an area and tend to make it lighter than you actually are seeing it because it's warmer. And so anyway, enough of that. So this is the black and white version, the grayscale version. The next one is called, it's not a true no-tan, but no-tan means dark and white only. And it makes interesting patterns. I ran this through, actually it's the value viewer on my iPad, to see where my divisions of light and dark should happen. You don't want equal thirds of light areas to dark areas to middle areas. And I'm talking 3 values now, no more. And so this gives me an idea where I have mostly dark. The second third would be the middle value, and the third being the light highlights. I'll push that probably in the painting, but it gives me an idea of pattern. And we should be able to do that without using the tricks and tools of the trade here. the new digital trade, but it's so fun. Why wouldn't you use them? So this is the view of the gridded painting. Photograph. And I did it in quarters rather than thirds. Ordinarily, when I'm painting, I will just touch the edges of the canvas in thirds so that I have an idea of where interest should lie. In this case, it seemed to be it conformed better with quarters. So I can see this goes over half, and isn't that funny? Right dead center, so we've got this blank area I'll need to deal with. And so from there, I did my study, which is over here. The study, now this is important, in order to grid up so that the study will be the same proportions in the larger painting, those grids are very important. So I gridded this in quarters as well, so that these smaller motifs wouldn't end up being that small over here. And believe me, I've done that before, not thinking and wondering why the larger painting is so weak, whereas the small one is stronger. But it's because I did sight size, not on purpose, just through not thinking and measuring. So that is why I grid. More accomplished artists, people who've got this down better, don't need to do that. After you do that for so many thousands of hours, you pretty much have it down. But for this program, I think it's important to show you. So then we're back to the original motif. I think that's it. Oh, and this is the study that's being shown over here. I just shot that yesterday. It has changes are being made. I hope not to make too many while I'm painting. The reason is I love the water, I love the reflections, and I love all the distance. So you have to have a reason. You can say, I love that scene, I think I'll paint it. And you have to stop and ask yourself what specifically it is you love about it. Say, I love hollyhocks. Well, what do you love about them? Well, I don't know, I just love them. You need to get rid of the love for a while, and get down to the brass tacks, the bones of why, so that you can make an effective piece of work. And keeping those value separations from one another are extremely important. If you if your lights end up being mixed in with your dark masses, it just punches holes in the painting and the viewer doesn't know where to look. So I'm sticking to 3 values. I may end up with more, but it's a really stronger painting if you stick to your 3 values. No-tan is 2 values, and I would suggest you look up no-tan if you're not familiar with it, and there are books on it of the patterns, the give-take of the black and white patterns being made. So it's the compositional relationships between light and dark that we're looking for. And the aerial perspective, the shadows, this and plus the cast shadow is all one design. And I'm going to make some changes in here, like I said. Relationships, this is all one shape, and not to get faked out by the lights. It's so important to not use white in your block-in for as long as you can avoid it. And 9 times out of 10, we'll jump to the lights because that's what's really shining and we really see it well. You get those on there, then you've got a bunch of greasy white paint that isn't going to help anything. You'll never get your values back. So that's very important. Keep those lights out. Don't paint where they go if you must. But so we keep the lights out. Dark patterns are very important, so we have something to look at. I did tone my canvas warm. That's a transparent red oxide wiped off. More of an ochre is fine. When in doubt, go warm, because we have so much blue going on, and violet and all this dark inky stuff. It could be inky. That's the reason for that. Also, in the gridding process, when I did my grids, I just marked instead of drawing the lines. And I also went back in and I marked where the rocks start, where I make them go past center here. And so I did make some marks to aid me in drawing so that you don't have to watch that struggle. And if I were a better artist, I would have been able to draw that right in front of your very eyes. Okay? So this is just basically just some basic marks so that I'll be on spot. Before I swing a brush, we need to talk about palette colors, and I'll do a quick run through of these. I have some colors I don't ordinarily use, and I'll tell you why I'm using them today. So, titanium white, lemon yellow. You can go to regular cad yellow light. I did a medium here. A warm and a cool of each color. I threw in ochre. God only knows why, but I do end up using it. Yellow ochre, and sometimes gold ochre if I want more punch. You can mix your own yellow ochre, but you know, for the purposes of expedience, I'll put it out there. Cad orange light, and let me tell you, that doesn't all play the same game. Of course, none of these colors do, depending on the product, the brand you're getting. I like the one that when you mix it with ultramarine blue, it tends to go green. The other cad orange light in another brand is more red, and so when you mix it with blue, it tends to go more violet than green. It's just personal preference, and I encourage you to play with all kinds of colors and see what they do. This is cad red light, and so these are my basics, but I threw in a permanent red medium, and that is by Rembrandt, because it has less yellow in it than the cad red light, and I mix up some cleaner warm temperature things for mixing into skies. It's just a personal proclivity of mine. Alizarin Crimson Permanent, and I switched to that from regular alizarin because it's permanent and it's a little browner, which made me less than happy, but I've made myself get used to it, because otherwise your regular alizarin will go away. It'll fade right out. Now, on the violet side, this is a quinacridone violet. Not particularly necessary, but I love to mix it with a cobalt blue and a little tint for a graying purpose. I just use it for all kinds of things. So we're going to do this just for fun. And I keep it on the palette. It's a neutralizing color for some blends of paint. If I get too bright, too Easter egg looking in my turquoises or something, I can move this warmer or cooler and tamp down what's going on. I think it's important to have a gray somewhere, a neutralizing effect. Otherwise, your whole painting will look like an Easter egg. And while I love color, too much of a good thing is not nearly as provocative as a good color next to grays. Then it really enhances it. And if you love the warmth in something, by putting warmer stuff next to it, it takes it away. You have to cool it down. So that's the combination of quinacridone violet and ultramarine blue. It was a prism violet. I read this in a Ted Gorshner book years ago, and I can't find prism violet anymore, so I just like that combination. Okay, now we've got some different, let me go over here. On the green side, this is, forgive me folks, phthalo green, and it's a monster. I'll either use phthalo or the Viridian, and sometimes no green at all. But for this painting, I'm going to use phthalo green and transparent red oxide. This is, and I only use this when I'm painting water, and this is Prussian blue. I have heard that it goes black, but Gamblin Colors tells me that theirs doesn't. I'm going to go with that because I like it. It's not as strong as one would think, but Prussian blue, and I'm going to jump over here, this awful little business here. I never use this either. It could be, other people are useful using it, but it's raw umber, which is just pretty much of a really awful muddy color. But those together and a little yellow ochre make some good water stuff there. It's a shortcut to that turquoisey water business because it can go down into the deeper, more black colors too. So we've done cobalt blue. Again, I like that for the mixture. And also I will use cobalt and ultramarine in skies sometimes. Then there's ultramarine blue. So some of these are outlier colors that I don't always use, but for this painting I'm going to. I did say that you can paint a painting with greens and not use any green, and that's a pretty good idea, because green is one thing that just really needs to be taught to behave itself. Over here on the right side, this is an Indian red. Again, I don't use that all the time. It can be just a dreadful color, or it can mix a gorgeous violet, especially for your backgrounds, rather than cad red light to make, or alizarin either, to make your background grays. Then we're down here with the transparent red oxide. I find myself using that never, ever, ever to make browns. None of this brown stuff needs to be used when you're making brown, because brown happens pretty much whether you want it to or not, in my opinion. All you do is add something warm to a violet and you've got brown if it has enough red in it. So that's pretty much the covering of this particular palette. How do we put paint on? And I ask myself this a lot. How do you put paint on? Well, I was using for plein air painting very stiff paint unthinned, so that the next layer could be slightly thin more and it would sit on top. I'm not doing that for this indoor painting. I'm starting thin, truly thin, with the Gamsol and building and not using white. If white goes in there, then you're just getting greasy and stupid. So somebody tap me on the shoulder if I dip into the white. We've got our subject matter here I'm painting from. I marked where it's going, darks to light. Darks first, and sometimes that's almost physically painful to make yourself stay in that range until you're through with everything. In fact, when I painted this in the last couple of days, I didn't put in my darks in here. I was just sort of, not sure, a little scratchy. And so that's why it's so busy and overworked, because I had to put it back in. So I'm going to make take more diligent care to do all my darks, and then the next value. In fact, I'm going to paint this stuff into this. This will not go on until the darks are in. So let's get started. Brushes, I pretty much use, I like flats, bristle flats, but I'm using everything. These long Egberts are kind of fun. I'm looking for just a good, these are synthetic that don't curl, they're pretty good, and bristle flats, that's pretty much the deal. But I'm trying to learn more tricks as I go. Okay, I think I'll start with the oxide transparent and the green, the phthalo green. What is that green that that comes out of a tube that is the mixture of these two? I don't remember. It'll come to me. Sap green. So you've got it's a sap green. That's what they make. But you've got a little more leeway here. This is transparent red earth. I said oxide, but I think it's pretty much the same depending on the brand. I use a lot of Gamblin color, and I love their product, and I love the non-smelly stuff. What is that? Gamsol. Okay, here goes nothing, folks. I think I need to mix up a dark violet too. So with this red oxide, if you mix it with the green, you can see where it goes. Keeps it warm. It can be. If you mix it with a ultramarine blue, it goes pretty black. I'm going darker probably than one should. if you go all the way down to the darkest dark you can get, you have nowhere left to go. The only reason I'm pre-mixing these is because I'll need a lot, and I'm just starting mixing up a couple of darks, hoping, I mean, once you've got the right color, you might as well have more available to you, rather than just dipping and mixing as you go. There's enough going on there too. So let's go ahead and see. I think these, let's see what we got here. Okay, I'm going to not, I think I need to go darker, more violet over here. I'm going to not talk so much while I'm painting because my brain doesn't do two things very well. I had to give up chewing gum a long time ago. I think I'm a little too thin. See my mark? Oh, it's probably halfway mark. Below half. If you want to put in an angle, if you want to know what this angle is, or this angle, or or this angle, just hold your brush up in front of your eyes and match the angle, and you'll have it. Okay. Now I'm painting faster than I probably need to, but I just think you poor people. You have to put this on fast forward to just get anything out of it. Too thin, I'm too thin. Know your surface. And I'm just getting to know this one. It's a little slick. So I think what's going to look nice over there is some more red. I'll be painting the back. It'll have white in it. I'll be cutting into this stuff. I think I need a bigger brush. Another thing that happens, and I notice it on this study, when you, watch this, when you go like this, you get a glare. But when you get those glary things, then you can come back with a brush and straighten things out. I had to reach for this fan brush because I got this business in. I wasn't expecting such a smooth canvas. That's my excuse, and I'm sticking to it. So I'm just going to smooth the things out a little bit here. I perhaps got a little too thin, but I like to see the transparent in some of this stuff. Oh. I don't know. I'm still just trying to make up this area here because it wasn't there. It was little light pictures, you know. It was pretty. The motif was pretty much divided right down the center, and so I'm trying to make these groups work a little better. Now we don't want to, I think we need to know the difference between sensitive and precious. We don't want to get too precious because it won't hold up across the room, and it will tear a painting apart rather than help improve it. Getting a little more of that gray blue in there that I put for some distance. And that is one slick canvas. Okay, back to these little more distant guys. I wonder if I do some of this. That's a good idea for some thin painting. It will tend to dry so that I can put the other cooler colors over it. I'm going to bring something back down in here. This business, which is really muddy and I didn't ever solve with my study, is in actuality is a rock back there. And it just looks funny, and it had stuff growing on it. It was so busy. So I'm going to run some value of these trees back further. It won't be the same value, but it'll be a row of trees, bringing you back into the painting, as well as the bush will help. But we need something dark behind. We need something dark behind this. Otherwise, it won't work. So yeah. When in doubt, go thinner. What a plan, what a plan. So then I really stress having your plan ready and following it. And then, but of course, let me quote Neil Boyle. He's a fine artist who passed away some time ago. This is a quote from Neil Boyle. "Sometimes I start with a full cavalry on horseback and end up with a lone rider." So that's when the plan, goes awry. But basically, you need to stick with your plan, even if it's a bad one, I guess, and learn for next time. So yeah, that plan's important, but sometimes it can just, sometimes the plan is just stupid. I've done that before, thinking I had this great plan, and the very thing that needed to disappear from the painting was what I had centered the whole painting around. I fell in love with an area, and then it ended up being the very thing that needed to be taken out to make it work. But that's why I did the study. We won't need to be doing anything drastic, just trying to turn something out here. If you hold your arm out straight and don't crook the elbow, just very straight, you can get a measurement. 1, 2, and 3/4. Where was that? I did that from 2.5. Okay, here. 1, 2. Okay, so I'm coming down far enough. I need to get this, the bank in here. That rock is there. You want a straight line, just move your whole body. So I don't think I'd better labor over these. I'll let them set up a little bit and get this other business in. So I'm doing that measuring how far this comes in. It ended up being that this was 1, 2, 3.5 of that. If we were doing a portrait, we'd really be in trouble. At least with the landscape, the eyes don't have to match. Okay, I think we're good here. I'm going to work on these little guys. Okay, so if you're feeling like this is all going slow, really slow, and like it's watching paint dry, you can always fast forward, but I think it's important to cover line drawings and then filling in the mass rather than mass drawings and just cutting back in to draw it. I find that, and there's nothing wrong, there's not a wrong way, but I find that if I had enough of a line drawing going, I put in my, where I wanted things to happen by these marks to start with, just dots of reference, and that helps me. And another thing is I'm so used to drawing with a brush that I'm really very poor if you put something with an actual point on it in my hand. I still want to do that rather than line drawing. And like I said, there's not a right way, there's not a wrong way. But if you are if you came from, just doing line drawings, those lines can become too precious when you're painting. When I was first starting to paint, I would do a line drawing and then I would paint right up to that line but never quite get on it because they were so sacred. They mustn't be messed with. I was that insecure. So be careful that your line drawings don't become the most sacred thing you're dealing with, because it's the masses and how they're stated and the edges. The masses that make your painting bold. And I'm trying to limit this to not a lot of masses. Let me cover that again. 1, 2, then this is all a mass, hills and mountains. You could say 3, 4 if you wanted to, and 5 for the water. This is just decoration. This stuff in here is just, jewelry that comes on at the end. But that's 5 major shapes. Try not to get too many of those going. 5 will work, 3 to 5 or 6. So that's the deal with why I'm just drawing these in, because I'll mess around with these edges when I paint back through and back and forth to give them their shape. I think at this point in the game, and I can't say too much for a proper shape, these are so much more graphic and much more interesting when they're put in nice edges. And that's what we're going to shoot for too, because really a painting is painted at its edges. What kind of shapes do we have here? Negative, positive. They tend to make the painting rather than the accuracy of our line drawings. That's what I would do. I had a class years ago, and it was a plein air class, and we went up to the state capitol, and there were the columns, the big Grecian columns or whatever columns they were. And we sat and labored and drew these columns, and it was just. And then our assignment was to not draw the vertical columns, but play like those. That's a stack of records making that round. And so then we were doing this sort of thing. I'm not doing this very well with a brush, but that constituted the column. And the thing, only they were more solid, we're just doing ellipses. And it had a cartoon quality to it, and it also was much more interesting to look at. It was free. So, when you exaggerate, it can be really fun. And it can give your painting some serendipitous feeling or a relaxed feeling where a rigidly executed drawing will not. So it's just something to be in mind of when you do your painting. And this looks like a kindergarten kid did it, and I think we'll just have to try to keep the serendipitous feeling, and yet get a serious piece of art. Don't forget we're doing serious work here. Okay, enough talking. I need to be quiet. Now I'm using the Prussian blue and that funny business raw umber. It gives an interesting, not quite so out of the tube phthalo thing. Transparent in the water. Just, try to get that bottom business going. I fear I was a little too liquid there. It'll probably run, but that's, it'll help. Have it be more random than planned. I took a workshop from Michael Lynch a couple of weeks ago, and he talked about, when he was talking about his paintings, he said these earlier paintings were more self-conscious, and then the later paintings were, more loose, and I thought the self-conscious stuff looked great, but I like that description. It was self-conscious. Might as well get this business in. Okay, I'm going to put in the cast shadow. No, these are not cast shadows, it's reflections in the water. And they are going to show lighter than the darks reflecting them. Sunlight on water, that's what happens. So everything in the water is less than. It's going to be less light than the sky in the light areas, and less dark in the reflections than in the actual things reflecting them. Different things interfere with that to make it so. Over here, we can see actually into the water to see the bottom there. That should be fun. So that's pretty blue. I'm going to start darker than usual just because, you go over it and lighten up, but I need to clean up a little area here for it. Okay, I'm going to go back into that brown business. I know I said it was going to be lighter, and it is, so don't you fret. But right now I'm just going to get it in. Oh, silly me. That's another thing. When I just remembered, when I originally did this, I did the whole thing dark reflected, and then this sky business is cut back in, which kind of helps make those shapes interesting. And I skipped that part, and I really liked it, so I left it, those little dots. That's what I'm talking about, helping with your randomness. It's hard, it's impossible to copy spontaneity. And so this was more spontaneous, so I'm not going to try to get every little detail in there, but I am going to follow that plan because it's a good one. Cutting back in with light over dark can be very effective with your edge work. Nope, let's get that warmer. I hesitate to use the ochre because it has white in it. Horror of horrors. Orange, maybe. It isn't helping. The black. I better let that set up a little now so so I can get some actual paint on there. I think it's time to clean the palette. I'm getting too green now in everything. Well, maybe I'll just, that's the problem. It's time to stop and clean the palette and stop trying to stretch and make what's already there work. It's throwing good paint after bad or bad paint after good. So I'm going to take a break and do that. Okay, back again. I've cleaned my palette. I thought about a few things I need to mention to you. One thing is, where is the light coming from? This is backlit, more or less, and it's coming through, you know, that's where I'm assuming the light's coming from, and it'll be hitting these right sides. I'm not going to do too much in the tree areas to put highlights on. I'll do a bit more than this, but you don't want to really break up your masses. So there are another 4 stages that I have heard explained very well, and I like to follow that plan as well as your planning of your shadows and your spaces, and 2/3 to, you know, 2/3 of one, 1/3 of the other, never equal 50s. The other one is get your drawing in, which I did. I established where things go. Not very well, of course. Then go in like something similar to what I did and just slam it in there. And it will mess up the drawing somewhat, which gives it more interest than if it weren't. So one stage, get your drawing in, then slam the painting in, and then the 3rd stage is go back and correct your drawing. And the 4th stage is the very end. Well, I think you mess it around a little bit more too after that, after the correction of the drawing, but things are where they should be. And then the last maybe 2% of the painting, I call it hanging the jewelry. You just do the important little pops of what is needed. Now that all reads very well, and I try to follow that. But again, it talks better than it paints sometimes. Forgive yourself. It takes miles and miles of canvas to get this stuff the way you want it. Have fun while you're doing it, and instead of working and slaving over correcting that precious one painting, just keep painting. Just keep painting. Try to improve your batting average. That's all you can do. And enjoy the mixing and the process and the seeing, discovering what will happen, as well as going and buying new tubes of paint and bringing them home and mixing up and see how they work well with their friends and others, and tinting them out. It's just, there's nothing hard and true about this. Yes, there are basic rules, like in Carlson's guide to landscape and other places where the sky is the lightest, the ground receives the most light, therefore it's next. You know, the angles are the next light, and going toward dark, and the verticals are the darkest. And that's all very fine and good in regular 45-degree sunlight, non-snowy areas, except areas like where the ground is really light and baked. The sky will be darker. Onderdonk, I don't remember his last name, wonderful Texas painter, did a lot of bluebells. His father was a painter. Look at an Onderdonk painting and it just turns all that theory upside down, because it's Texas at high noon probably. And that's wonderful. So just those rules are there to give you guidelines, and then ignore them. Anyway, I think that's all I had to say. I'm going to go ahead. Oh, no, I had one more thing to say. Pardon me. Center of interest. Gee, girl, where's the center of interest? Well, I don't know. My teacher asked me that one day, and I said, well, let's see, I like this. And oh, yes, and then I like that over there. And so, but I really like this. And he said, well, perhaps the next time I'm around, you will have decided. So let's talk about center of interest. The party, where the party's at. Lightest light, darkest dark, hardest edges, cause the eye to go there. We don't want to rush there, however, we want to still be scanning. We want to be led there by stopping at little waypoints that are supporting of that center of interest. And when we get there, there better be a party. So, squinting down, I see these transitions here as being where my eye goes. But there's a waypoint, interesting shape. It gives you distance, depth, coming forward. We're being led into there. We're being led up and around, but I'd say it's pretty darn near center, but not right on center, of course. I believe center is around here somewhere, and of course it's up here. I used to paint paintings really putting the center of interest so offside. These are all good places where the thirds meet for a center of interest. If you get it too far off center, it's going to tip, you know, unless you have a really smart approach. So his center of interest is pretty near the center, hopefully not right in it. I've done that before. I've measured and ended up with like a whole window or the entire spider rock right in the center. So see what you can do about that. But anyway, that's pretty much lead in, bang. Nice stopping points on the way. Enough said. Now I'm going to see what I can do about this painting. Instead of messing around with these shapes, I'm going to continue and fill in the canvas. I've still got some darks to go and some mid-tones, okay? I forgot to show you about this ugly brown. When I first showed you the picture of it in the beginning of this video, it looked like it had been mixed up. It had not. It's just such an awful color. It comes out of the tube practically like peanut butter. So I had thinned it down so I could work with it. It's not a mixture. No one would ever mix that on purpose. I'm rude. I know it's a great basis for a lot of toned canvases in painting, still lifes. It's just, I was taught to not use brown, but to mix it. That's just one way. And so, and my problem is everything turns brown anyway. So I have to try to stay away from that. Okay, we'll start back here again and put some of these dark things in before I get it lighter and lighter. Oh, I don't know why I promised you that. Now I'll have to actually show you how it's done. Again, I'm not mixing white for as long, because all this stuff all needs to be gone over. For any of you attention deficit, I find that that can be very helpful as well as very harmful in a painting. And sticking to my plan is the part I'm fighting with now, fighting myself. That's why I mentioned that. But the ability to dream, daydream, is also pretty good quality in a painter. Okay. I was choosing a bristle brush rather than a synthetic. I think for transparencies that tends to go on a little easier. See, that mixed brown, orange and purple. What are you going to do? But at least it's my brown, not that brown. But look how brown that didn't go on. Okay, I'm going to be quiet now. I'm not trying to fill all of the holes in the canvas between strokes. I find that that all works itself out eventually, and where it doesn't, it's got that orange glow from the canvas itself, which helps. Let me stop here and explain that you may do that, tone your canvas, unless your paintings start ending up all looking toned, and then it's nice to try working on a white canvas as well. But when you, on a white canvas, you can draw in with a transparent warm, do your drawing in with it so that where your strokes skip, that drawing will be in there in a warm tone. It won't be that blasting out white. So anyway, in any event, I'm not trying to connect anything and make it all the same. I'm going to work on edges as the painting builds. I'm searching for a transparent to put in here to build this business on, and that's why I'm guessing. In order for this to be a very light, sparkly area, it has to be applied on top of you have to come somewhere for your light. No kidding, kids. When you start with lights, it messes up everything else because you'll never get your darks back. So cutting back with light, cutting into a painting with light is much preferable than starting with light, and I can't stress that often enough because we all do it. We see the sparkles and the lights and we put them in. Well, there's nowhere to go when you put them in. So you have to get a base of some kind. I'll go back to the golds. They're more fun anyway. Just a little base here. I got a lot of nerve using that phthalo green, but what the heck, you can get some pretty fun stuff out of it. Establish the water line. I'm going to go up here and pull a little bit of this dark business down every now and then. Ooh. Now I'm painting with a little bit stiffer paint, and it seems to be going well over this other stuff that's starting to dry a little. But I want some actual paint to go on now. So I've started adding white. Oops. And I want to vary. You know, repetition with variation is sort of the mantra there. You don't want everything to be the same, or your eye just goes stupid. It just stops if everything is the same. Stupid eyes. We're the conductor here. I'm using this to just straighten the strokes, just barely hitting it. From where I'm standing, or depending on where light angle is, you'll get some really brighter strokes from a horizontal than if you were doing a vertical stroke. So I'm trying to calm some of this down from where I'm standing so I cannot get all that glare. This is not really liquid paint, so that this is just straightening out the stroke rather than really doing any blending to speak of. Blending's okay too. Well, I'm pleased to report that stuff is drying. Okay, let's get those mountains working. They're a little different shape than that was in the original photograph. It doesn't matter as long as they're not stupid. I guess that's close enough. This is too bulbous. Like I say, this is not a face, so we can make them be anything we want, but preferably not a heart. Sorry. Mixing up some different paint. So I'm just trying out shapes, and you don't necessarily have to be a slave to what's there. It tends to tighten things up a bit. And so I'm just trying out different shapes to see what I want to do like again, I made a decision to make these tree patterns come back in rather than put a rock there, a big old cliff that doesn't work for me. So feel free to make changes as you go. Safety is in sticking to your plan, but that doesn't mean stick to every little. Besides that, this was spontaneous. You can't copy spontaneity. You have to use spontaneity to keep things running and keep things flowing. So ask yourself a question. I'm changing this because it's important to the painting, or it's working better, or it works for me. And if the question comes back to, I'm changing this because I don't know what I'm doing, so I'm just cutting that out because I don't know how to interpret that, that's another pitfall. You can just, stop painting all kinds of things because they're too hard. You're learning. It doesn't matter that much if it's a painting you can show your neighbors or not. I can't count the stacks and stacks of beginning plein air paintings I have in my studio. And I'm not throwing them away. I found out how much this gator board, that isn't gator board. I found out how much that stuff costs, and I sand them down, or I'll finish them, or I'll use them. But I'm going to have to rent storage space maybe. Just toss it aside, learn on the next one. Toss it aside, learn on the next one. I have heard of a book, Brian Mark Taylor is talking about it. I can't remember the name, but it talks about chunking. So I'm going to divert here for a minute and talk about that. What I got out of the book was you can learn faster. It's still going to take you 10 years to get 10 years ahead, but a specific thing that you're having a problem with, if you work on that, and the second it starts going wrong, toss it and start all over again from the beginning and work on it until it goes wrong. Toss it. You will learn to do that. Your muscle memory and your recording in your brain will serve you better than if you just try to do that every few weeks or so. Only 15 or 20 minutes a day. Work on rocks, sky, clouds, whatever. But you'll get so you can repeat that and repeat it and repeat it instead of being afraid, gosh, that turned out right, I'll never be able to do that again. That's simply not the way to learn. In art classes, a teacher may come around and say, oh my gosh, that's just so lovely. And then he'll scrape it off and say, now do it again. And instead of crying, you have to get the confidence to be able to do that again.
Hey, would you like to win a beautiful painting worth almost $3,000? We've got a beautiful Joe McGurl plein air study that he's done of the sunset in Maine. It's gorgeous. If you want to have an opportunity to win it, go to paintinggiveaway.com. Just put in your email. That's all you've got to do, and you only need to enter once. We'll be giving away the prize at the end of May. Go to paintinggiveaway.com.
According to the French painter and co-founder of the Fauvism movement, André Durand, the substance of painting is light. That's because light is what gives your work a sense of mood and depth, leading to and highlighting the critical points of interest that define your paintings. In the all-new Painting the Effects of Light instructional video, JKathryn Stats takes you on an exciting step-by-step painting experience that will change everything you thought you knew about painting light in the landscape. Follow along as Kathryn shows you how to paint a stunning scene at the entrance to Glacier National Park, featuring beautiful turquoise water, reflected light, rocks, aspen and pine trees, and a wonderful aerial perspective for distance. You'll discover the secret to using light to keep things vibrant and interesting for the viewer, how to set your angles and establish perspective, and how to find the center of interest for your viewer and lead them there.
a lot is put into color and how many colors and what color do you use. And this special coloring, as you can see, I just love color, but it's all red, yellow, and blue, folks. So I'm going to mix you 3 to 4 different color combinations that are versions of red, yellow, and blue.
You'll also learn how to use the knife tool to create harder edges, how to use the flathead brush to add the finishing touches, and much, much more. If you'd like to learn how to work with light in your paintings to create breathtaking effects for your viewers, then this video was created for you.
I'm very excited to have been able to do this after so many years, and the subject matter is divine. I think we have a lot to work with there, and I think you'll truly enjoy it. I hope so. I'd like you to pick one up today.
Painting the Effects of Light with Kathryn Stats is now available on DVD and streaming video.
Well, that was a segment from Painting the Effects of Light with Kathryn Stats. You can learn more about that at lilyartvideo.com. Now let's get to know Kathryn.
I was born in 1944, around the end of the war, after the Depression. My mother was a school teacher. My father was with the agricultural sciences department. You know, he did agriculture projects, and we moved a lot. He was county agent for a year here and there in Idaho. When I was about 3, we moved to Oklahoma. 3 different places, kept moving. When I was around 8, moved back to Salt Lake. My grandparents, my mother's parents, are from Kaysville, Utah, and they have a farm. They had a dairy farm. And so within a year after we moved back, my father died of lung cancer, very unexpected. And so my mother and her sister joined forces and raised the 4 of us children. I had a brother and a sister. She had a son, and they did a mighty fine job. Strong women, terrified, and they did a great job. I loved color and I loved pictures, but my sister really had the hand-eye coordination, and she could very interested in art, and she was going to be an artist, of course, but 2 widows say to you, "Oh no, you're not. Only 1% of the artists ever really make it, and school teacher or a nurse in case your husband were to disappear on you." So I was hearing this, but I wasn't very good at school, quite distracted, didn't study, and so I didn't go to school. My mother was just sick when I said I'm not going to college. And I got married more or less to not have to go to school, which is very, very embarrassing. And I was married at 19, had my first child at 21, had 2 girls about 3 years apart, worked just jobs, office type stuff, and would fall asleep at my desk very bored. There's nothing worse than clerk typists for boredom. And when I had a friend, and I saw that she had oil paints in her house and an easel and a palette, and she was been mixing these paints, and I thought, "Oh, you get to do that? It's like a real big deal if you think enough of yourself to go buy oil paints," because we didn't have a lot of money. And so about the time, 1972, Ken worked for Dun & Bradstreet, and we were transferred to Brazil. He had lived in Brazil briefly before that, knew the language, and so we packed off the kids and moved to Rio de Janeiro. And that's where I bought my first oil paint set. It was a little starter set in a wood box, and I copied postcards. And I also had brought some Walter Foster how to paint books, and I copied pictures out of that, and I announced I'm going to be an artist. And of course nobody was listening. And then we didn't stay in Rio as long as one. We were there on a lifetime thing, and Ken was disenchanted, and after about a year we came back, which was upsetting to me. I could have done about 5 more years. But when we came back, I asked my great uncle by marriage, LeConte Stewart, a really fine artist of the Edgar Payne era, from whom I should study art. And he told me of a gentleman that he had mentored in school. And so I went off to Frank Erickson with all my gray colors, thinking that would work just fine. Quickly to learn this was the Impressionist palette, and no grays, no browns, and I was just so upset because he made me paint this stuff with these bright colors. But the best thing he did was only 3. You got 3 colors for a year, and it was alizarin crimson, yellow ochre, and phthalo blue. And if you were doing something autumn, bright green, then you got to throw in a cadmium or 2. And I stayed. And the second year, you switched to orange, green, and violet. That was a tough one, 2 violets, and it was funny. But I loved it, and I loved mixing, and I met my best friend that I shared a studio with for 15 years in Frank's class. And so he taught me color, and he taught me how to mix brown and gray from scratch, which is now, now I fight always getting brown. If you're not careful, it'll turn brown. So it's a no-brainer. Anyway, I stayed with Frank for several years, and my friend and I would take painting trips to gather slides, and it's really nice to have someone to do that with. Yes, well, after several years, I started teaching at it was called the Art Cottage, and she sold paint and did some decorative type painting. And that's where I learned to paint, is making that stuff up on the fly. And learning from books, and also having to articulate what I was doing, because before you just do it. And so I really learned a lot. They did not learn so much, but they were good sports. They got value for their money. And one night in bed, I said to my husband, I said, I'm a little worried here, because I'm just making this, may I say shit? I was making this shit up as I go. And I'm just one step ahead of them. And Ken said, I believe you, and that really bothers me. Because he's always taking my advice on something that I'm totally up in the air about. I just make it up, and it scares him because he believes it. But I figure buyer beware. Selling evolved over a few year period to where, we started doing those little mall shows. It wasn't a plein air group. Intermountain Society of Amateur Artists, they didn't call it amateur, and showing the little paintings, and Ilva and I would show together, and we'd say, now look, we painted the same location, and she painted this way, and she painted that way, and we had a blast. We really had fun, and that we could sell our little 5x7s for $25 just was great fun. So I had a lot of training in framing. I mean, I hated all that business of framing and putting eye holes and stuff. But it's true that repetition makes you be good enough that you do that without thinking. And that reminds me of the mixing color, because I swear I mixed 90% of my colors and did 10% of the painting. And I thought, this mixing is just killing me. These three colors. And, after a couple of years, you don't even think about mixing. So it was very good training. We were very devoted to our work and somewhat competitive, which is helpful. And that's how we got started. And then after a while, there was a woman who produced the outdoor shows up in the mountains at a ski resort. And we spent a summer doing that. And then she had a gallery. She got a gallery, and we were in it. And that was the first gallery experience. And then we were just getting better. And so then after that, I went with a gallery downtown, and she went with another one, and doubled our prices because we'd been paying no commission. And we just kept on painting and taking painting trips. We were studying with then a student of Frank Erickson's, Ken Baxter, and he was a fine, fine teacher, and it was location, out of doors. And we were his followers and his groupies, and he was very nice, very understanding, very good teacher. And he at the time had been in the publications Southwest Art, and he was getting a reputation outside of Utah. And so that was good training. It was all plein air. And then, so we were getting better, and we just sort of stayed with the galleries for several years. And at one point, did some outside shows that got us local recognition, had some local press that was kind. And after that, I had a fan at the University of Utah. He was curator for their art department, and he really liked my work. I didn't know him particularly, but he was in Arizona and suggested to the Long Gallery that she look at my work. And so he got me in an Arizona gallery in Scottsdale, and bless his heart. And so I was with the Long Gallery in Arizona, which really gave me some access to the press. And so I was written, one of the Arizona newspapers wrote a lovely article, a short one. And you just get your work around a bit more. And then Shari Morrison, she had a publication. It was a newspaper format. Anyway, she was curating a show that had a brief run at the Cowboy Caballeros Museum in Wickenburg, Arizona, and I made it into that particular show for like 2001 or 2002. No, it was before that. Called Rising Stars, and so you were juried in that, and it was big time, So then I went to the show, and I won People's Choice, and I thought, oh, this is so cool, too bad it's not Artist's Choice. And then I won Artist's Choice in the same show. I don't think that worked real well for them, but I was delighted. And so, all the little recognitions, even though you're having a really great time, they really help boost your enthusiasm for learning. Oh, well, after my dad died and we moved to a big house, there was a book of world famous paintings had been left in the closet, and my sister and I pored over that a lot. And then the museum of the art museum at the university was very close, so we'd go up there, and we just loved pictures and art. And also, I was riding my horse at my grandparents' place every day in the summer. I wore several horses out, and my uncle, again, LeConte Stewart, was painting out there, teaching and painting, and we had his paintings on our walls, and they were at my grandparents' house. So there's something visual about the landscape joining his paintings and seeing it through his eyes that I just loved it. and riding your horse home at sunset where your shadow gets longer and longer. And I mean, it was just special. So that was pretty much my art experience. And in high school, I loved color. So I was taking a sewing class, and you learn about the complementaries. And I thought, well, that's all fine and good, but they're not nearly as interested as the analogous run of temperature. So I just loved color, and I loved to stir the food. My mother just had a stroke to watch it change, It's just, and I think it's an attention deficit too. I was just daydreaming and watching the divinity turn pink. So that's pretty much, it was just a visual experience. When Elva Malin, my good buddy, and I were studying with Frank Erickson, there was a woman who was a bit older than we were, and she and her husband had a business, and she loved art. She was an art nut, and she joined the board of the art center, and she pushed our paintings, and she would ask us to donate paintings. I think she'd buy our paintings, she'd put them in the auction, she'd buy them back in order to fund the art center. And she was incredible for us, and a great deal of fun too. She wasn't some stiff upper lip lady. We'd go out and paint together, and she studied with Frank as well and just had the best time. So Grace was a huge encouragement. And the art center at one time said, we'll take the paintings, but we're not taking those velvet-lined frames. They were really tacky, but we thought they were great. And so Grace really helped put us on the map, in our own mind anyway. I credit the teachers, the Frank and Ken, and then my husband was wonderful. He's not threatened. Well, he's a banker, So then he'd say after the mall shows, have you ever put a dollar amount to have, if this is worth your time? And I didn't know who I was. And I said, I don't know if it's worth my time or not, but I'm having a blast. And so he was quite behind that. He's never had a problem. And he's my biggest supporter. The better you get, the more critical your eye is. And I remember thinking I'd look at a magazine and think, gosh, anybody can advertise, you get better, you think, well, I can do that. And so then you start thinking about what takes a painting to the next level, and discovering that just mimicking what you're seeing doesn't do it. You have to say more about what you want to project to your audience. Painting a very accurate painting of what you're seeing is just, why does that painting exist? What's its reason? And so it gets to be more, well, I'll use an example. Matt Smith, I took a workshop from him in 2002, and we pull up to this aspen grove, and I think, I dare you to turn out something decent of this. Dare you. Well, he'd make a tree special. And so I picked up that you make things special, they have more sparkle, they have more interesting edge work. There's something special about how that's treated. Look at Jim Reynolds' landscape book, and he's got bushes and trees in a field, but he's got some negative spaces that knock your socks off. And it's the difference between just a painting and something that makes you swoon. And so it's trying for that sort of thing. Keep painting and enjoy your failures and learn from them. And keep the brush flowing. If you don't enjoy the process, then growth doesn't mean anything. So many favorites. So I'm going to think, I'm just going to pull out Vasily Polenov, a Russian painter who I discovered in Russia when I was on a trip in '92, a bike trip. And it's the first time I had enough desire to conquer the myth, the mystery of green, the color green, because he handled it in such intelligent ways. And green was something I simply avoided. I just said, I'm not going to paint that crap because I didn't know what to do with it or how. And so Vasily Polenov was a wonderful painter, and he could paint it all. But of course, there are so many wonderful painters. I don't know what I'd ask him. Actually, my favorite place is the last place I visited, and then it wears away, and you have to revisit it to refresh your acquaintance with it. But I love Torrey, Utah. It's south central Utah. It's 10 minutes outside of Capitol Reef National Park, which is delightful. But Torrey itself, to look over the town, you have great red rock in the background, and then you've got farm country in front of that. So it's a combination of the farm country and the red rock. And morning and evening is exquisite. And during the day, 2 p.m., Capitol Reef is exquisite because it has higher walls and deeper shadows. So it's just delightful. I love Torrey, Utah. And then when I come back from Arizona, then I'm really, really hot to do prickly pear in the Arizona desert. It just depends on where I was lately. And I backed into this experience rather than sought it out, painting Glacier National Park. And so going north from Salt Lake is not something I have done until I was involved in a show at Hockaday Museum last year and this year. And it has to do with painting in Glacier. I discovered motifs that I would never have put myself up to. And it's a great stretch for me. Linda Tibbetts, a fine painter who was local, and so she knew the people at the Hockaday Museum and the historian and the people that were wanting to do a show based on the deceased women that really tossed it all aside and went to Glacier under very different circumstances and painted. And so they wanted to do a show honoring them. And I got an email or a letter saying, would you be interested in participating in our Glacier show? And I'm thinking, sure, I can send them a couple of pieces, assuming it was a large group of people participating. And so our schedules cleared enough that we were able to meet and paint together. It was Linda Tibbetts, Carol Cook, and Rachel Warner. I'd never met any of them. And we got together, and Linda just worked her heart out arranging for complimentary stays at different cabins, one on the west side of Glacier and the other on the east. And we painted together for a week. And a film crew, Montana Film Department, sent their crew to film and document this. And I realized what a big deal it was. And I thought, okay. But it was a wonderful experience. And so that's how that came about. And it ended up being wildly successful for that museum. And so they're doing it this year, invitation only, and it's just a list of wonderful female painters, just wonderful. And people say, well, why do all female? And I'm saying, why not? It's a blast. Have a good time, paint your heart out. Why not? I hope to get better, and rumor has it that after a certain age you don't, statistically, and that you tend to go backward. and I'm just going to fight that all the way. And I do things like take workshops to stir my brain up and accept challenges I wouldn't otherwise accept, like the glacier thing, that make me grow. Well, not necessarily as a painter, even though that's the core of my life professionally. I'd like to be remembered as a person who was warm, generous, and kind. With the growth of plein air painting, we've got some wonderful artists out there who nail that, can start to finish, and they're beautiful. And I've never finished a painting on location that I was happy enough to sell or pass on. Well, with the exception of maybe 2 in the last year. But it's never been my goal. I'm out there to have a good time, to make my color notes, to enjoy what I'm doing. The landscape is so wonderful and it changes, and just to be there and watch it, painting gives you something to do while you're doing that, while you're ogling the landscape. And I just love doing it. And I'll tell you, I've got, I don't know how many hundreds of stacks of panels with paint on them I have. And I don't throw them away either. I go through them every now and then, and there are paintings that need to be painted from them, or that they need to be able to be turning in. When the only time I throw paintings away is if they're jinxed and they just are so bad and they're never going to be better. Then I take a razor blade to them, but not many. They always have potential. It's like saving old magazines for when you retire. You're going to read them, probably.
That was Kathryn Stats and Painting the Effects of Light. You can learn more about it at lilyartvideo.com. Thanks for watching. I'm Eric Rhodes.
According to the French painter and co-founder of the Fauvism movement, André Durand, the substance of painting is light. That's because light is what gives your work a sense of mood and depth, leading to and highlighting the critical points of interest that define your paintings. In the all-new Painting the Effects of Light instructional video, Kathryn Stats takes you on an exciting step-by-step painting experience that will change everything you thought you knew about painting light in the landscape. Follow along as Kathryn shows you how to paint a stunning scene at the entrance to Glacier National Park, featuring beautiful turquoise water, reflected light, rocks, aspen and pine trees, and a wonderful aerial perspective for distance. You'll discover the secret to using light to keep things vibrant and interesting for the viewer, how to set your angles and establish perspective, and how to find the center of interest for your viewer and lead them there.
A lot is put into color, and how many colors and what color do you use, and this special color. And as you can see, I just love color, but it's all red, yellow, and blue, folks. So I'm going to mix you 3 to 4 different color combinations that are versions of red, yellow, and blue.
You'll also learn how to use the knife tool to create harder edges, how to use the flathead brush to add the finishing touches, and much, much more. If you'd like to learn how to work with light in your paintings to create breathtaking effects for your viewers, then this video was created for you.
I'm very excited to have been able to do this after so many years, and the subject matter is divine. I think we have a lot to work with there, and I think you'll truly enjoy it. I hope so. I'd like you to pick one up today.
Painting the Effects of Light with Kathryn Stats is now available on DVD and streaming video.